The story began in His Majesty's reception hall. The emperor said to his guest in a cold, sympathetic tone that he understood perfectly well when even relatives turned away, but asked him what he thought. He raised his head but remained silent for some time. Duke Ein von Eder was still very young, but he was already the head of the family of the Guardians of the Sea. While the north of the continent was protected by the emperor's family, the duke's family guarded the foggy seas in the south, where strange things sometimes happened. Monsters of various kinds lived there. As the duchy defended its territory, it grew stronger and stronger, and even the imperial family had to consider the matter, as they could not stand by and watch. The emperor wanted to give his daughter, from the weakest family, in marriage to the duke. The young man saw His Majesty's intentions, but agreed to the marriage aloud. A few days later, the duke received a letter from the barony of Lavo. He was a little surprised by this, but he knew that the daughter of this family was about to turn 20. However, in the end, it did not matter to him who his wife would be, because he was not sure that he would be able to enjoy marriage. His only hope was that his bride would not run away immediately, frightened by the cold and fog in these lands. However, when he saw his bride, he was speechless, because standing before him was a child. The girl did not greet him with a happy look either. Looking closely, she immediately thought that this was the same unworthy duke who wanted to marry a 5-year-old child. In her past life, she was a commoner who couldn't even get into the magic academy. But with this one goal in mind, she taught herself magic and became a supreme mage. Joining forces with her allies in the magic tower, they were able to defeat the dragon that had been terrorizing the nations of the world. But just when she thought that everything had finally ended well, she was betrayed by her closest friend. She thought that this was how her life full of disappointments had ended. However, in her next life, she was also unlucky and the girl fell seriously ill. The doctor said that if her father could find a plant and make a decoction, everything would be fine. The man asked where he could find the plant. The doctor told him, but immediately emphasized that the price would be high. Meanwhile, the girl thought that she was lucky to be born into a baron's family. The girl thought that thanks to this, she would have everything she wanted. But she quickly realized that she was wrong when the baroness started screaming that the price was exorbitant and they couldn't afford it. Turning to her husband, the woman shouted that it was his fault for getting the maid pregnant, so now he had to deal with it. The baron knew that they didn't have that kind of money. Finally, he said that they would have to give up on saving their daughter. Hearing this, the girl was devastated. Although she had been given a life in the baron's family as Nazia de Lavo, it did not save her. Because the spell around her heart remained at the level of a supreme magician, her child's body could not cope with it. After her father gave up trying to save her, the baroness began to treat her terribly. She even forbade her to go outside, fearing that her illness was contagious. Gradually, the spell consumed the girl's heart, and her condition grew worse and worse. She endured unspeakable pain day after day. However, one day the baroness burst into the girl's room with a group of maids and ordered them to cover the girl's ugly scars. Without explaining anything, they immediately grabbed Nazia while she tried to escape. The girl began to cough up blood, but the baroness did not care. The woman only insisted that not a single drop should fall on her clothes. Noticing the wedding dress, the girl was shocked and did not understand why she needed it. Noticing the girl's surprised look, the woman explained that from today she would become a bride and marry Duke Eider. Now the young duke stood looking at his bride and still couldn't believe it. He turned to the knight who had brought the girl and asked if it was really true that a child had been sent to him as his wife. The knight looked away and replied that the duchy had given its consent, to which Ein said that he had not expected a child to be brought. The knight said that if the duke sent the girl back, she would be branded a renegade for life. Ein angrily replied that he would never forget this insult. After that, he returned to the girl. For a moment, she thought that the duke was handsome. The boy told the knight to give them a few minutes. When he leaned toward her, the girl smelled a familiar scent and suddenly remembered that it was the smell of the sea. When the duke held out his hand to her, the girl placed her small hands in his palm and thought that the pain of this unusual event was nothing compared to the pain in her heart. She felt uncomfortable with the duke looking at her like that and quickly turned away. A few minutes later, Ether announced that he was accepting the little lady into his family. The girl was shocked. She was ready to call him names, but suddenly the duke said that the condition was that she would become his adopted daughter. This surprised her even more, because she was sure that even if she became his adopted daughter, she would still be the duke's child. However, she could not understand what the duke's plan was. She could not forget Rayton, who had betrayed her, who also wanted to kill the dragon for a better future. However, she understood that if she refused this offer, she would not be able to return to the Baron's house. The thought crept into her head that as long as her heart did not settle down, nothing terrible would happen if she stayed in the duchy. Finally, she said that she agreed to the terms. She was willing to do anything, even if it meant working as a servant in the duchy. Before she could finish her sentence, the girl suddenly felt ill. She slowly lost consciousness and began to fall. The Duke quickly ordered someone to call a doctor. As soon as the sun touched the girl's face, she woke up instantly. Natsia quickly looked around and immediately noticed that there was a lot of space around her. She wondered where she was. Suddenly, she heard someone notice that she had woken up and tell someone else to let them know. Approaching, the maid asked the young lady if she knew where she was. The girl introduced herself and said that from today she would be serving the young lady. The girl was a little embarrassed, but immediately thanked Azelta. The maid said that the young lady should not address her so formally. A moment later, the maid said that the furniture in these rooms was intended for adults, but soon everything would be reworked to order, so she asked her to wait a little. Looking at the girl, the maid silently cursed Baron Lavo's last words. Natsia seemed to feel that she could read the maid's thoughts. To change the subject, the maid suddenly said that the Duke had prepared a gift for the girl. The little lady was surprised, and the maid immediately showed her a beautiful candy. However, the treat itself was almost as big as the maid, not to mention the girl. Noticing the girl's surprise, the maid explained that it was a lollipop. But sitting down heavily on the floor, the girl thought it looked more like some kind of shield. Suddenly, she clutched her heart, realizing that she had reacted too strongly. Azelta noticed this and rushed to the little lady, saying that the doctor would be coming soon. Hearing about the doctor, the girl was a little surprised and thought that even in her past life, she did not often visit doctors because they liked to lecture her about her health. Suddenly, she realized that she could be scolded for such a strange reaction to a candy. Although she herself knew that the reason she felt so bad was because her heart couldn't handle such an amount of mana. The girl quickly forced herself to calm down and said that she was fine. The maid was about to say something, but there was a knock at the door. The doctor entered the room and introduced himself as Delfiro. He immediately wanted to begin the examination. He had barely entered the room when he stopped abruptly and looked in surprise at the girl, who was standing confidently next to a huge ice cube. However, he thought it was a shield. He wasn't sure, but he thought it looked cute. The doctor handed the stethoscope to the maid, who helped him examine the girl, because according to the rules, a noble lady could not be examined directly by a man. A moment later, the doctor returned to the girl and asked if her family had mentioned anything about any illnesses she might have. He also pointed out that the girl had been born with a weaker body than usual. The little lady confirmed this. The doctor was a little surprised by this, but asked if the girl had received all the necessary care, to which she squeezed his hand and remained silent. Without waiting for her answer, the man promised that he would do everything to cure her. The girl assured him that it was not necessary because she understood that there was nothing to talk about since they had not even noticed her mania. Natsia assured him that she was well enough to continue having fun. The doctor almost cried when he heard this and asked the little lady not to give up. He continued and said that if the girl got worse, she should come back immediately, and after a few days of preparation, the doctor said he would conduct a more detailed examination. The lady was surprised. The doctor's words sounded as if the girl had already come to terms with her terminal diagnosis, even though she only needed to learn to control her mania. With that, the doctor hurried away. When the girl was left alone with the maid, the latter sat down next to her and offered her a piece of the candy. The little lady asked if it was really okay to eat it. The maid confirmed this and took out a hammer, which greatly surprised Natsia. Before the girl could ask what the hammer was for, the maid struck the candy hard, breaking it into small pieces, which she handed to Natsia. Watching the maid, the girl suddenly thought that she didn't really look like an ordinary servant, even though she was very kind to her. Reaching for the plate, she nudged the maid. It seemed as if the girl had said something to her that reminded her again that although the head of the house had accepted Natsia as his daughter, she was still needed to look after her. She had already seen and understood that Delfiro had taken a liking to the young lady, but she told herself that she must remain cautious. The girl, in turn, handed the maid a few pieces of candy and said they were for her. The little lady wanted them to share. The maid couldn't believe it for a moment, and looking at the girl, noticed that she was actually very cute. Thanking her, she accepted the treat. However, the girl's weak stomach could not handle the candy, and she felt nauseous, so the maid said that it would be better to eat some porridge for now. The next day, the Duke received a letter from the Lavo family. The servant explained that after the detachment they had sent did not return, they had no other choice. A couple of days ago, bodies were found in the forest, which were probably sent by the Lavo family. He was surprised that these knights were unable to deal with ordinary monsters. In the letter, they wrote that if the bride arrived at the estate unharmed, they would arrange the marriage. The Duke crumpled the letter in anger and quickly threw it into the fire. He couldn't believe that not only had they sent him a 5-year-old girl, but they also expected him to marry her. The servant was angry at the Baron's insolence and wanted to write a reply, but the Duke said he would do it himself because it concerned a child from his family. As long as she bore his surname, he would not allow the Baron's family to come near Natsia because she was now his daughter. Eider understood that formally, the Baron was deceiving him. If this led to a battle, he would be able to avenge the insult and restore his honor. However, he still could not understand why he insisted on adopting this girl. Suddenly, he realized that she reminded him of himself. The doctor distracted him from his thoughts. When he came to his senses, the Duke immediately asked Delfiro if he had really made detailed preparations for the girl's examination. However, the Duke immediately noticed that the preparations had taken a little longer than expected. The doctor confirmed this, but explained that the girl's heart was so small that it was difficult to examine, as if something was squeezing it. After that, the doctor quickly changed the subject and said that he had heard the other maids eating ice candy, which he had initially mistaken for shields. He also said that everyone wanted to receive a gift from the little lady, but when people began to crowd around, it seemed that the girl became a little nervous. He was told that the girl was most frightened by the shadow of a tall man, so Delfiro assumed that times in the barony were much harder than they thought. The Duke understood everything, so he said that they would have to calm the girl down and assure her that she had nothing to fear now. Natsia was already lying in her bed, but sleep would not come. She looked around her room again, which had changed so much recently. She couldn't understand why everyone was so kind to her. If this had been her past life, she would certainly have helped someone in the same situation. However, even though the people in the duchy were much better than those in the barony, she did not want to trust anyone until she found out Eider's true intentions. The maid approached her and, noticing that the girl was still awake, greeted her, to which the little lady asked to be allowed to sleep a little longer. The maid had no objection and said that she would tidy up the room in the meantime. When the maid left to do her chores, the girl slipped out of bed unnoticed. She wanted to explore the area, so she cautiously peeked out of each door and tried to sneak quietly to the exit. When she stepped outside, she was immediately met by tall mountains. Noticing the thick fog, the girl paused for a moment. Reaching out her hand through the fog, she immediately felt that it was almost like mist, and as she breathed it in, she felt it filling her. Natsia began to look around, because if the fog was so thick, there must be grass somewhere. She was not mistaken when she found rare grass growing nearby. She needed it for her potion. The little lady suddenly noticed that even the sand was pure mana. She was amazed because for her this place was almost paradise. Looking around to make sure no one was nearby, the girl decided to use the mana from the fog as her own, because she couldn't control her own yet due to her physical limitations. The girl decided to use the magic of invisibility to continue exploring the area. That's how she ended up on a beach where the waves were crashing violently. Natsia saw a huge shell and quickly approached it, unable to believe that such enormous shells existed. Looking closely at the shell, she saw something inside that looked like mussels, but noticed that they were completely dry and thought that they could be used as a table. She went inside and laid out all the grass on the table. The girl couldn't contain her joy because she liked it all so much and her heart felt lighter. Continuing to laugh happily, the girl leaned back a little on the shell to sit comfortably and thought that this place could be her secret hiding place. Suddenly she heard a strange sound, and in a moment the shell closed. The girl did not have time to do anything and realized that she had fallen into the mollusk's trap. The shock almost stopped her heart, so the girl quickly forced herself to calm down. In the complete darkness, something suddenly lit up. Opening her eyes, she saw a pink pearl. The girl was sure that it wasn't someone's magic, so she assumed that it happened naturally. This moment gave her the confidence that it wasn't time to give up. Thanks to the mana that the girl looked outside, she managed to make a magic circle. That's how she used the magic of discovery. That way, she would know for sure if there was anything nearby. However, the pearl wouldn't leave her alone, and the girl tried to reach it to see if she really couldn't touch it, but it was out of reach. When she thought she was about to reach the ball, it suddenly disappeared, and the girl did not even have time to react. Voices began to be heard outside, and the shell slowly opened. A crowd of people gathered around, and the girl could not immediately see anyone because of the bright light. The girl barely held back her tears when she saw Azelta. The maid immediately took the little lady in her arms and, pulling her out of the shell, shouted for someone to take the girl to the mansion. Once inside the palace, the girl couldn't stop shaking because she didn't expect so many people to go looking for her. It was even more unexpected than when the shell closed. The maid said that it was better not to go near such mollusks because they grow so large due to the strange fog around them. The girl did not immediately understand about the fog. The maid asked her not to do that again and said that she was very worried about the little lady. Natsia could not believe that someone was afraid for her. In her past life, she had almost always been thrown into hell, and no one had ever cared about her like this before. The girl understood that there was nothing to take from her, which made it even stranger that the maid was so worried about her. She asked Azelta why she liked her. Smiling, the maid reached into her pocket and took out the same pieces of candy and said that the girl had once given her something valuable. That was why the maid had promised to serve the girl until the end of her days. Natsia looked at the remains of the candy in surprise and after a moment said that this candy really worked wonders. Deeply impressed by this effect, the girl thought that she should give out more pieces of this candy. While Azelta was helping the girl wash up, she noticed that all this was still strange, because she was sure that she had used the magic of invisibility, so she did not understand how they had found her so quickly. When she woke up in the morning, the girl sat up a little in bed. Looking around, she noticed someone standing behind the door and called the maid to ask about it. The maid immediately replied that it was Knight Losha, who had been assigned to guard these rooms. Immediately after that, Azelta asked Mare to call the knight to the lady. The girl remained silent, although she had no idea how to get acquainted with the knight. When the knight approached the little lady, she immediately looked up at him and was somewhat surprised. The knight introduced himself as Losha Diaz and said that he was serving as her guard by order of the Duke. The girl immediately noticed the knight's eyes and quickly realized that he had a mystical gaze that allowed him to see the unfathomable. Such vision allowed him to see better. However, when tired, they temporarily lose their sight. Mages are able to look into such eyes and see the memories of their owner. The girl had never seen such clear vision before. Suddenly, Natsia realized that she could try to look into the knight's memories. In an instant, she understood why her invisibility spell had not worked and why the knight had noticed her immediately. After that, Losha immediately reported this to the Duke, and if they wanted, they could catch her right away. She was a little upset that her invisibility magic was so weak. The maid noticed that something was bothering the girl and asked her about it. Natsia blushed and apologized for looking for so long. The girl said she was impressed by his eyes, and the maid explained that everyone in the Diaz family had eyes like that. The little lady was genuinely surprised that they weren't fake. She complimented the knight on his eyes, and he was impressed. The girl thought it was a little strange to say such a thing on a first meeting, so she changed the subject and asked him to take care of her. Kneeling on one knee and taking the lady's hand, Losha said that he would sacrifice his body and soul for her. After that, Azelta immediately said that she was glad that the girl was not frightened by the knight's gaze. Natsia was a little surprised, but then she noticed that Mar looked a little uneasy next to the knight. This intrigued the little lady, and she thought that perhaps people in this city did not like mystical eyes. The man shouted loudly, holding a bloody sword in his hands, saying that it was not a lady, but some kind of monster. Behind the boy, everyone was talking about Mark Diaz, who had killed the lady and kept saying that she was no longer herself and wanted her to be killed, but in the end, he did it himself. People also saw that these eyes had been passed on to his son. Losha heard every word they said, but did not respond, only trying to get away quickly when he heard that they considered it disgusting. His younger brother distracted him from his terrible memories and asked what he was thinking about. The boy said nothing, but was glad to see his younger brother and quickly hugged him. Freya was almost suffocated in the embrace, and when he broke free, the boy asked to go for a walk. The older boy thought for a moment, because the fog was very thick today, but finally agreed and said he would watch over his younger brother. The boy was very happy and promised not to stray far. Suddenly, the boy asked why his older brother was in such a good mood. Losha replied that someone had called him handsome. The younger boy thought that someone had taken a liking to his older brother's face. However, his brother denied this and said that it was not his face, but his eyes. The boy was impressed and fell silent for a moment, then asked who liked his brother's eyes. Diaz replied that it was a young lady who had recently arrived. He said that the girl had compared his eyes to sparkling diamonds. Frey seemed a little jealous of his brother and said that he would also like to hear such words. After Natsia got to know her bodyguard better, she began to notice that he was now staying closer to her. The girl even thought that she would like to see the knight's eyes more often. She also thought that she had come to a paradise, remembering the sand and everything else that was woven from magic. Suddenly, she realized that after the huge shell closed, it was almost impossible to open it with brute force. She hoped that other people had not noticed her magic circle, but just in case, she decided to say that it had been there before she arrived if anyone asked. The girl also understood that she could not stay in this place forever, so she had to explore the area as quickly as possible. A maid came to her and asked the little lady if she would like to read a book. The girl happily agreed and said she wanted a book with lots of pictures. Azelta promised to bring one soon. The girl had already thought that they would bring her something about the climate or nature or something like that. However, she was brought a children's fairy tale. At first she was surprised, but she had nothing else to expect, because she was still a child. It was good that Natsia already knew how to read. As soon as she opened the book, she saw a text on the first page saying that the first emperor, Milian Brahman, was the one who banned magic. The lady couldn't believe it and reread the sentence again. She continued reading. It went on to say that the first emperor could no longer restrain the power of the magicians, so he imposed a ban on the use of magic on the continent. However, some still ignored the ban, for which the emperor's knights hunted down everyone because magic was extremely dangerous. Therefore, all the magicians who were caught were taken away. After that, the cheerful fairy turned to the children in the book and told them not to worry, because all the magicians would soon be executed. Natsia was shocked that people were being killed because of magic. She quickly realized that now the question was not about using her for their own purposes, but if her mana could be detected, the girl would already have been executed. Realizing this, she almost threw the book away because she understood that her magic circle was still inside the shell and she did not know what to do. The maid noticed the girl's reaction and thought that she didn't like the book, but the little lady assured her that this was not the case, saying that she suddenly felt very sleepy. Azelta simply wished her sweet dreams. The girl heard the maids talking among themselves and deciding to leave the room, which was exactly what Natsia had been waiting for. But suddenly she realized that the foal was still there and silently asked it to go away. No matter how long she hid under the blanket, the knight did not leave and stood at his post, so the little lady had no choice. Finally, the girl quietly used her invisibility spell and even flew a little above the ground. However, using 2 variations of magic at once was still very difficult for her, so she knew she couldn't hold out for long. The girl quickly jumped out of the window and landed softly. She had to destroy the magic circle immediately before anyone found out about it, but if someone already knew about it, she had to find out who. When she came to the place where the shell was, she quickly opened it, but she did not expect to find Duke Eider inside. The Duke was told that the girl had been found by the sea in the fog, but he did not understand why she had come here. What could have interested the girl in such a place? He did not want to question his daughter about it, because he was afraid that her weak heart would be frightened by punishment, so he decided to check everything himself. The Duke could not forget that this sea had frightened him very much in his childhood. Once, his brother, who had always hated him, smiled at him and said that he had hidden his sword in a shell. The servants and the other knights also laughed for some reason, but at the time he couldn't understand why. Ignoring them, the boy went to the shell his brother had told him about. However, the shell was closed, of course, and monsters began to gather around. Now the boy understood why the servants and everyone else had been laughing at him. He began to cry quietly, begging someone to save him, but he quickly realized that no one cared whether he lived or died. Now thinking about it, he realized that the fog was no longer so thick and that Natsia was relatively safe. Suddenly the Duke looked up at her. The girl stopped and thought that her adoptive father had probably noticed her, but quickly dismissed the idea as nonsense. With that, she continued on her way and climbed into the shell. The Duke almost rushed towards her. The girl also looked up at him. She couldn't believe that all this could be real, that despite her invisibility spell, the Duke could still see her. In her past life, those who had mastered the art of sword fighting could sense the magic of invisibility. However, they only noticed slight fluctuations in the air. But the Duke could see her, and the girl did not understand what kind of master one had to be to do that. Ain in turn asked his daughter if this was her place. She replied that it was not, and decided to quietly cancel the magic of invisibility because it no longer made sense. Then the Duke asked why she had brought sand here, and the girl replied that it was beautiful. He also asked about the dried grass leaves, and the girl gave the same reason. The Duke said nothing more, and the girl breathed a sigh of relief that Ether did not condemn her. Suddenly, she noticed that the Duke was looking at something, and when she looked in that direction, she noticed that the fog had grown thicker, so she could not see what was there. While she was trying to see something, the Duke said that soon the fog would cover even the estate, and then various monsters would come out. The boy also emphasized that those in the sea were even more dangerous than those on land because they sneak up from behind unnoticed. The Duke said that for this reason he would not be at the estate for some time. So he told the girl that if she wanted to make this place her own, she should do so, and he would not come here anymore. The girl was amazed that the Duke had allowed her to take something into her own possession, as she understood that everything around her belonged to him. She knew that she was currently very weak and of little use, and she did not understand why the Duke was so kind to her. The girl wanted to ask why Ether had taken her into his family. The Duke paused for a moment, then told her that he had an older brother who constantly bullied him because he considered him a threat to his title. After the shell closed and he was left alone with himself, he realized that no one in his family was on his side. After that, An focused on building up his strength on his own, after which his father chose him as his successor, and upon receiving the title of Duke, he expelled his brother and all his servants from the estate. The Duke confessed that he had always been haunted by emptiness, but when he met her, who was so similar to him in the past, he wanted to give her everything he had been deprived of in his childhood. The Duke continued and said that in his opinion it was a wonderful opportunity for both of them, because she was able to escape from the Baron's family, and if she wanted, she could later take revenge. Natsya was impressed. She understood that the Duke was telling the truth, and that it was beneficial for both of them, but she suddenly wondered if a 5-year-old child could really understand these words. The Duke said that if she had any more questions he would help her, then turned and walked toward the mansion, telling the girl not to stay there too long. Watching him leave, she thought that the Duke was really smart, but for some reason he hadn't thought about magic. She decided that it was because he hadn't heard of it. She even smiled a little, because it wasn't surprising that the Duke hadn't heard of magic in a world where it was forbidden. And yet after this conversation, she felt a sense of lightness. The next day after the walk, Losha personally carried the little lady in his arms to the estate, and the girl suddenly wondered when the knight had become her personal transport, but she couldn't refuse. The girl knew that from this angle she could continue to gaze at his eyes, which she liked so much. Suddenly the knight turned to her and said that instead of secretly running away from the palace, she should ask him for help. The lady asked if he would help her at any time. Natsya said that the knight must not tell anyone about her escape. The knight remained silent, and the girl realized that he might ignore her childish words. A moment later, Losha said that he would report everything to the Duke after her return, and the girl smiled and said that it would look as if she had never left. Diaz couldn't help but agree that some people shouldn't know about her escapades, referring to the doctor. The girl was surprised to find this interesting. The little lady held out her little finger to seal the promise, but the knight simply replied that it was his knight's oath to keep his promises no matter what. She was delighted. However, Delfiro still found out about her last escapade, and she had to listen to a lecture, but remembering her past life, it was even sweet to hear. The doctor warned that if the little lady did not take care of herself, he would start adding sour herbs to her food. In both of her lives, the girl hated sour things. The sun had not yet risen, and the girl was still fast asleep in her crib, but in a moment she began to dream and shuddered slightly in her sleep. The Duke placed a small bag next to her and, looking at the girl, thought that she was having a nightmare. Either thought that this was the first time he had seen the girl so close since the day they met. He wanted her to be the first to understand that she was safe in this place. That's why he realized that he shouldn't have approached her so thoughtlessly and drew a parallel with himself because he was the same. The spikes, which were still too small to cause any harm, could only hurt their owner. That was why only when she understood that they were allies would they be able to have a serious conversation. After that, the Duke left the girl's room and, walking down the corridor, suddenly said to his knight that he would like to make a toy, preferably a hedgehog. So Eider ordered that several sketches be brought to him, from which he would choose. The knight was surprised at first, but promised to organize everything quickly. When the girl finally woke up, she was told that she had slept for 2 whole days. Natsia did not believe it at first. Helping the little lady eat, the maid said that the sun was now behind the fog, so it was sunny outside, and asked the girl to spend more time in the yard. Suddenly, she noticed a bowl standing on the table behind her, and asked the maid what it was. Azelta stood up and said that the Duke had left it for her while she was asleep. The maid said that the Duke was sorry he had come in without permission last time, so he had prepared a gift. The girl looked at the bowl, genuinely surprised that Ether had done this for her. On the tray were pink shells, herbs, and a small jar. The maid asked if the little lady liked it. In a moment, Nadia beamed with a smile and said that she liked it very much. She thought that a simple apology would have been enough, but here she had a whole gift. The girl thought that this was more than enough, and leaning over the gift, fell into thought. The maid asked her what she was thinking about, and the lady asked the maid to wait. A few minutes later, another servant entered the room and announced that Delfiro had arrived, but the maid asked him to wait because the girl wanted to create something. The servant also wanted to see. After a while, the girl finally made an enchanted amulet out of shells. The servants applauded her joyfully, rejoicing with her. The servant said that it was very beautiful, but now it was time for the inspection. The girl asked them to do it as quickly as possible because she wanted to go somewhere else. The little lady said that she would also like to make such amulets for her maid, doctor, and knight. Meanwhile, Losha quietly peeked into the room. Azelta asked where the lady wanted to go, and she replied that she was going to see the Duke. Walking down the corridor, the girl was beside herself with joy, holding the amulet in front of her. Natsia thought that the Duke was not a bad person after all, so she decided that this amulet would help her get to know her adoptive father a little better. Suddenly, someone appeared in her path. She bumped into the stranger and dropped the amulet, which rolled away a little. The smell of money hit the girl's nose. She looked up and met a pair of somewhat angry eyes. The girl immediately noticed that the stranger looked very much like the Duke, but something was not right. The man said he had come to meet his niece. She could not understand how one could show all their malice with just a look. Losha immediately appeared before her and said that the lady looked dissatisfied. The stranger was angry that the knight dared to show his disgusting gaze in front of him. The girl thought that the stranger's eyes looked no better, but the man calmed down in an instant. The man said that he wanted to leave a good impression, so he quickly introduced himself as Cassian von Eater, but a voice behind him said that he had long since lost his surname. The uninvited guest replied that it was cruel to force him to live the life of a commoner, to which the Duke replied that he was only allowed to visit the estate for family events. The Duke's brother asked if this girl was the same family event, because she was very lucky to be reborn from a poor baron's family into the Duke's family. Suddenly there was a crash, and the man told his brother that he had let the palace go to ruin because there was rubbish lying around everywhere. The girl clenched her hand in anger because it was the shell of an amulet. The Duke's brother continued, saying that the girl had no friends here, so he had come to keep her company. However, the girl immediately spoke up and said that she did have friends here. When Cassian asked who they were, the little lady pointed to 3 people standing behind her. The man just laughed and called her faithful servants things, saying that some people were not even worth trying to talk to. The girl did not even want to listen, and thanking the Duke's brother for introducing himself, turned around, called her friends, and led them away from that place, and they immediately obeyed her. Cassian wanted to stop the girl. The Duke also stood there speechless. Both were impressed, but neither understood what the girl meant by introduced himself. As soon as the girl disappeared with her servants, the Duke quickly grabbed his brother by the collar and warned him that he had only 24 hours to leave the palace. However, the elder brother was not concerned. He could not forget the girl's words about people who should not be associated with, and thought that she was referring to him. Returning to her chambers, the girl beat her pillow with all her might, while the servants stood silently at the door and watched. The lady was angry that she had not had time to give her the amulet. Losha even asked if the pillow was really soft. The maid assured him that the pillow was made of the finest cotton. They continued to watch her, remembering how the girl had rebuffed the uninvited guest, and rejoiced that their lady was not only beautiful, but also very intelligent. Finally, Azelta asked everyone to go about their business, as it was time for the girl to rest. Approaching the girl, she asked if she was really so angry. For a moment, Natsia fell silent, then said that she was so angry that she was ready to kill the Duke's brother with a hammer, and pointed to the table where the object lay. The maid smiled and said that she would support the girl in this, because she had thought the same thing. The lady was surprised, and the maid said that she didn't like him either. The maid wanted to change the subject and said that the most important thing now was that she had asked for a special treat to be prepared for the girl and that it would be brought soon. The little lady was very happy. However, when the food was brought in, the girl was disappointed. She saw the porridge she ate every day, but the maid told her to look at what was next to it. Opening the box, the girl saw cookies. The little lady was very happy, and the maid said that they had been specially made to be easy on the stomach and offered the girl a try. After tasting one, the girl immediately lit up with a smile and said that it was really delicious. The maid asked how the lady was feeling now. The girl replied that she felt better after eating them, and the maid was delighted. A moment later, Azelta said that if the heart is filled only with anger, it will quickly harm its owner. The girl first looked at the maid in surprise, then smiled and assured her that from now on she would think only good thoughts, after which she thanked her. When night fell, the girl went to bed with satisfaction after the day she had had and thought that it was all thanks to the maid. Suddenly, the girl noticed that light was coming into the room. Looking at the window, she noticed that the curtains were not closed, although the maid would never have left them like that. Looking out the window, the girl noticed Cassian and jumped out of bed. He began knocking on the window and telling her to open it. The little lady decided to ignore him, but the man began to say that he could fall and the Duke would be blamed for his death. The girl became alarmed. In addition, he emphasized that he could spend the whole night there. At that, the girl realized that this man was not going to give up so easily. She got out of bed and approached the window, warning the uninvited guest that if he tried to come in, she would scream. Cassian told the girl to save her voice for another time because today he had come to give his niece a gift and threw a stone through the crack. The man said that the shiny things looked incredible, and without giving the girl a chance to respond, said that since she had accepted his gift, it was time for him to go. The girl stood there for a while, staring at the stone. She knew it was an unusual thing, a magic stone. Besides, it was unusually tightly compressed. In the past, such stones were simply thrown away because they were unstable. Also, at the slightest touch from the magician who radiated mana, it immediately exploded. The girl did not understand why Cassian had brought it to her, but she refused to touch the object. The girl knew that the maid would not be harmed, so she decided to ask her to throw the stone away the next day. Returning to bed, Natsia began to get angry again, not understanding what was wanted of her. The next morning, the girl immediately showed the stone and said that a night visitor had given it to her, so she asked to get rid of it. The maid looked at the stone with some surprise. The girl also said that she had no choice, so she opened the window because the man threatened to do something strange. After that, Azelta immediately rushed to the lady and hugged her. The girl was very surprised by this and thought that something had happened to the maid. The maid apologized for this, but the girl was not angry because the hug made her feel warm. The little lady wanted to explain that all this had more to do with the Duke than with her, but the maid said that Cassian was very powerful and that the girl needed to become even stronger to protect herself. The maid also asked her not to open the windows to anyone in the future. The girl looked at the maid in surprise, not understanding why she was so concerned. She was sure that the Duke was safe because if his brother wanted to harm him, he would have done so earlier. Natsia also thought that she herself was safe because if there was a loud noise, Losha would immediately come to her room. She did not expect the maid to be so worried. However, understanding this, she took the maid by the hands and promised to be more careful. Azelta calmed down a little when she heard this. A moment later, she asked the girl to wait a little and left her alone for a while. The little lady was very surprised by this, watching the maid follow her. Suddenly, Losha rushed into the room, apologized for the night's events, and said that it was his fault. The girl tried to calm him down, saying that she hadn't called him. After that, the knight said that from now on he would also guard the outside. The girl was very surprised because her windows were on the 4th floor. The knight said he would sit in a tree. The girl imagined this, but quickly realized that this was not a good idea and assured Losha that everything was fine. Then the knight wanted permission to be her personal guard. The little lady did not understand what this meant, and the maid immediately explained that in this case, the knight would be in the lady's room. The girl realized that this would cause some inconvenience. She knew she could not use magic in front of Losha. The maid noticed the lady's concern and said that someone else could be assigned, but the girl firmly insisted that Daiz stay. After that, the little lady decided that she should learn more about Cassian and went to the sea. The maid asked what exactly the girl wanted to know. From her smile, the girl thought that the maid liked him, but she immediately denied it, still smiling, and said that he was very dangerous. Suddenly, she said that she did not understand how such an angel as the lady had ended up in this mansion, because before that there had been no children here except for Azelta's relatives. She stopped abruptly, realizing that she had said too much, so she apologized and went about her business. The girl wanted to stop her, not understanding why the maid had suddenly changed her mind. The lady looked at her maid in surprise. She knew that the maid had relatives, but she understood that now was not the time for questions. She decided that it would be better to continue gathering information about the Duke's brother. Moving on, she met a knight on her way. He immediately introduced himself as Henas, the eldest of the knights of Itara. The girl was surprised that he introduced himself so formally. The lady decided to start questioning him right away and asked if he knew anything about Cassian. He replied that strange things had been happening around that man. The fog would thicken, and the plants would wither. Natsia thought about this because both the fog and the plants in this place were magical, so she assumed that the Duke's brother might be a magician. The girl asked if the guest was perhaps an athlete because he had managed to reach her window on the 4th floor. The knight was surprised, but he had heard that the man had been agile as a child. Suddenly, someone behind him confirmed the knight's words. Looking back, the girl saw her adoptive father. The Duke said that he had already been informed about yesterday's incident. Seeing the Duke, Losha immediately knelt in greeting, but His Highness was only angered at the sight of the knight because he had been given orders to protect the lady and he had broken them. Natsia immediately spoke up in defense of her guard and said that Cassian had climbed through the window, so Sir Losha was not to blame. The Duke was surprised that his daughter had so bravely defended the knight, so he decided not to punish him, but he could see that his older brother was upset with the girl. The girl could not hide the truth and bowed her head. To calm his daughter, the Duke gently stroked her head and said that he would do everything in his power to protect her, but that she must be careful. The girl was touched. She was pleased by this gesture from her adoptive father, but this idyll was interrupted by a knight who came to report that troops had been sent to the Sea of Fog. The Duke took his hand off the girl's head and turned to leave, but his daughter stopped him for a moment. Turning around, he saw an amulet made of shells in her hands. The girl said that she had wanted to give it to him last time, but it had been broken. The Duke accepted the gift. However, when he put it on, the girl noticed that it was too small. She was disappointed because she had used all the plants she had to make it. Noticing his daughter's concern, the Duke smiled and sincerely thanked her for the gift. The little lady was impressed by the Duke's smile because she had never seen it before, and she was so surprised that she couldn't even speak. Returning to her room, the girl began to rejoice that the Duke liked the amulet. The servants rejoiced with her and also thanked her for the amulets that the lady had given them. After that, Azelta asked who else the girl wanted to give the remaining 2 amulets to. The lady thought for a moment because she definitely wanted to give one to Delfiro, but she didn't know about the other one. She didn't have time to think, as her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. The invited knight had come to deliver a message from the Duke for Losha. He was immediately summoned to the Diaz estate. The knight was also told that the Duke ordered the stone to be placed near the estate as soon as possible, and that he must leave immediately. The girl was surprised by the mention of a stone. Losha immediately returned to the little lady. He was ashamed because today was his first day as a personal guard, but he asked to be excused. The lady immediately agreed. She understood that it was something urgent, so she did not want to delay the night. Diaz remained silent, then simply promised that he would return soon. Azelta watched the knight leave with some sadness. The girl suddenly asked what kind of stone they were talking about. The maid explained that it was used to temporarily clear the fog. The maid suggested that it was most likely for one of the lady's friends. The girl was surprised. Nausea thought that Sir Losha had a son, but the maid denied this and said that it was not a son, but a younger brother. The girl then thought that the urgent message was about that friend. The maid said that the child had been very ill since birth. Holding the shell amulet in her hands, the girl asked the maid if the friend was so ill that he could not meet her. However, she first had to obtain permission to visit from the Duke. Her adoptive father explained that monsters were more active at this time of year, and the fog was even thicker. The maid agreed and explained that it would be very dangerous, but the girl almost rushed forward and promised that she would only deliver the gift and return immediately. Noticing his daughter's determination, the Duke said that the problem with the fog could still be solved, but he had a couple of conditions. The first condition was that the girl would only go accompanied by a group of knights, and she would first need to obtain permission for the trip from her doctor. The girl was surprised that her adoptive father agreed much faster than she had expected, but his conditions made her a little wary, so she decided to pretend that she did not understand. After the maid carefully explained the Duke's words, the girl finally said that she understood everything. The Duke, in turn, thought that he should have explained it in simpler words. At this, the little lady said again that she understood everything and asked the maid to tell her friend that she would arrive soon. Turning toward the exit, she said goodbye to the Duke. When his daughter left, the Duke thought that he had never refused her anything before, but he noticed that the girl had been expecting his refusal, so she immediately began to persuade him. He understood that she still needed time to open up to him. Besides, the girl still addressed him as Your Highness, even though the Duke had made it clear from the first day what their relationship was. Ain assumed that it might still be too difficult for the girl to understand his speech. He decided to officially write a document declaring Natsia his heir, but this proved not so easy. In her chambers, the girl was restless while the doctor examined her. She wondered if she could leave, but Delfiro said her heart was not yet stable. The girl did not want to hear this. She was not interested in her heart, but in her general condition, and she wanted to hear that she was healthy, but the doctor again emphasized that she would not have enough stamina for the trip. Without waiting for the doctor's verdict, the girl placed an amulet in his hand and whispered that if he let her go, she would grant him any wish. The doctor was taken aback, but finally said that he would accept the gift, but it would not change his mind. The girl exclaimed that she felt fine and was healthy. Finally, the doctor relented and said he would allow her to travel, but on the condition that if the girl's condition worsened, she would inform him immediately. The lady was delighted and agreed. However, a moment later, she felt a sharp pain in her heart. The doctor wanted to rush to her, but she assured him that everything was fine. She was just too happy. The Duke began to read the doctor's report carefully, in which he wrote that the girl's heart was weaker than that of her peers and that she was not feeling well. So he could not give permission for the trip because she would not be able to make it. His Highness clearly saw that the doctor had not given permission for the trip, but he understood that if he did not come up with something, it would negatively affect his relationship with his daughter. However, the Duke began to worry greatly about this, because he had no idea what to do in such a situation. But when the moment of departure arrived, the girl stared with her mouth open at what was in front of her. The doctor and the maid even smiled at this. In front of the little lady was a huge carriage with several small sofas inside. The girl rushed inside and said that it looked like a bedroom on wheels. The maid said that the girl could look out the window or take a nap if she got tired. Natsia said that the servants could also go to sleep if they wanted to, but the maid said that there wasn't enough room for them. Then the girl showed how adults could fit in, but as she lay down, she fell asleep without noticing, and when she opened her eyes, she jumped up. The girl was upset that they hadn't woken her up because she wanted to look out the window, but the maid said that the girl was sleeping so soundly that they didn't want to wake her. Besides, Azelta emphasized that they would soon arrive at the Diaz estate and the girl would have plenty to see. As soon as they arrived in front of the carriage, a horse appeared and bowed to the girl, thanking her for coming. The little lady sniffed and felt that this place smelled like a pharmacy. Delfiro immediately rushed inside, saying that a patient was waiting for him. The girl did not delay the doctor, and the knight, turning to her, said that he would quickly go and change into his uniform, but Natsia assured him that it was not necessary. She explained that she had arrived without warning and only wanted to deliver a gift to her friend. The horse was impressed by what he heard. The knight thanked the girl, but said that although his brother was feeling better, he didn't think it was a good time for gifts. The girl said she would come back another time. However, the knight didn't want to send his guests away and invited them in for some cold drinks. The guests went inside, and the girl asked what was wrong with Losha's younger brother. Suddenly she felt a strange magical energy, and turning in the direction it was coming from, saw a door from which these streams were coming out. She thought that there was definitely no monster there. Meanwhile, while serving refreshments, the knight explained that his brother had suffered from headaches and heart pain since birth, and about once a month the situation worsened, but this time it was happening more often. Suddenly, Delfiro burst into the room and immediately asked if Freya was still being attacked. Only then did he see that there was a lady in the room. The maid scolded the doctor a little and, leading him away, said that he shouldn't burst into the room like that and scare the lady. The boy was a little embarrassed by this. The girl suddenly stopped all three of them and asked why they were talking to each other so informally. The doctor explained that they were all the same age, so it was normal. The girl was shocked. She couldn't believe that the maid and the knight were the same age as the doctor. The servants didn't understand what the girl meant. Finally, the maid understood what the girl was getting at, but among the three of them, the doctor was the youngest because he was born in December. The maid tried to support the doctor, but Delfiro couldn't believe that overwork had affected him so much. While the three friends were talking, the girl felt that same magical energy again. She quickly rushed to the door, saying she needed to use the restroom. The maid wanted to go with her, but the little lady assured her that she could manage on her own. The maid was very surprised by this, as she was sure that the girl did not know where the bathroom was. Losha listened to the girl's footsteps and realized that she was probably heading for his younger brother's room. The girl ran as fast as she could in the direction her energy was leading her. Finally, she found herself in front of a closed door and realized that this was the place where the energy was coming from. The girl quietly opened the door and looked around. In the dark room, she noticed a bed in the middle with someone lying on it. As she approached, she saw a boy who was breathing heavily. The girl had expected something like this and began to worry that the child had been through so much. Touching his hot forehead, she asked if he was all right, but quickly realized that the boy was in no condition to answer. In fact, she was already familiar with this illness. Streams of mana swirled around his body. This was called the awakening fever, which manifested itself before the full disclosure of a magician's powers. The sheer amount of mana was impressive. However, she knew that without intervention, such people did not survive past the age of 7. If the streams of mana were untangled, there would be a temporary but effective improvement, and by repeating the process, he could be cured. In her past life, she could have done this without any problems, but in a world where magic was forbidden, she had no choice but to accept the boy's death. The choice was difficult. Suddenly, a book lying nearby caught her eye. Looking at it, she saw that it was an encyclopedia of plants. Looking around, the girl noticed a whole shelf of books describing everything about the surrounding world. She realized that, having been born sick, the boy had never left the estate. Natsia turned to the boy and asked if he would like to leave this place to explore the world around him. She did not wait for his answer, but smiled, knowing what he would say. The little lady took him by the hand and said that this must be kept a secret, because the power he would receive must not be shown to anyone. She concentrated, and it felt as if the whole world had disappeared. Only she, the boy, and these streams of mana, which the girl was slowly untangling, remained. When she came to her senses, she opened her eyes, but noticed that she was already in another room. As soon as she got up, the maid rushed to her, but the girl still did not understand what was happening. The girl thought she had dreamed that she had gone to visit a friend and give him a gift. She did not have time to continue because the maid said that it was not a dream. At first, Natsia did not believe that she could have fallen asleep just from untangling the strands of mana, because this was only the beginning. The maid said that she had already reported everything to the Duke. She also said that Delfiro would soon arrive to examine the girl. The lady was very frightened to hear this, because a visit to the doctor immediately after exhaustion meant that she would definitely be scolded. When Frey heard from the doctor that it would be better to keep an eye on him, he already understood what that meant, and there was no answer. The boy was so happy to hear that the Duke's daughter was his age that he even began to practice. However, the result was disastrous. The knight's younger brother understood that his time to leave this world was coming soon, so he wanted to show himself in a good light one last time, but he couldn't. However, he never asked for much. He just wanted to take a little walk with his friend. So when he heard someone's voice asking if he would like to explore the outside world, something stirred inside him. He heard a voice asking him to keep the power he was about to receive a secret. Now, looking at his hand, the boy wondered if it had all been a dream, but he felt much better, as if something had pushed away what was squeezing his body. Losha came into the room and was glad to see that his younger brother was awake. Frey greeted him and decided to ask if his brother knew who had come to his room yesterday. The knight replied that it was a young lady and that she had said she would visit again when the boy was feeling better. He was impressed to hear this. Then the boy asked what the girl looked like. Losha went to the table, opened a book with pictures of beautiful trees, and said that the lady looked just like that. Taking the book, the boy couldn't take his eyes off the pictures of trees. Finally, he was able to believe that the girl had really been there. Next time, Frey wanted to go to her himself. As expected, the little lady Delphiro was angry with her for not saying anything when she felt worse, but the girl did not expect the Duke to come here too. Finally, the doctor said that he would quickly examine the lady and let them know. As last time, the maid would hold the stethoscope. Azelta said that the girl might feel a little cold at first. The girl knew that even the doctor couldn't just look at the young lady's body, so she wasn't surprised when the Duke also turned away, but she hoped that the little chairs wouldn't break. After finishing the examination, the doctor said that although the lady had fainted at the Diaz mansion, she was now much better. The Duke turned to his daughter and said a little angrily that she wanted to jump higher than her head. The girl did not know what to say in response because she could not reveal her and Freya's secret. Nazia replied that she was just tired, but this answer only annoyed the Duke, and he turned to Delphiro, saying that he would answer for his sins later. The girl saw that the doctor was being scolded because of her, so she immediately spoke up and said that she had gone to the boy's room herself because she wanted to see her friend. She also said that there was a very large bed there on which the boy was already sleeping, so the girl herself did not expect to fall asleep next to him. Azelta, in turn, said that it was her fault, but the girl denied it and said that the maid had asked her not to go there. After listening to everyone, the Duke slowly got up and looked at everyone. Although something unpleasant had happened, there was no one to punish because everyone seemed innocent. With that, His Highness announced his verdict. Until the fog cleared, the girl would be restricted from walking around the estate. The Duke also said that he would make a further decision after carefully examining the girl's well-being. Nazia quietly agreed. After that, Ayn handed the envelope to the maid. When the Duke disappeared behind the door, the girl almost immediately clutched her heart. The maid immediately rushed to her, and the girl thought she had been too nervous. Returning to bed, the girl pondered the Duke's words. Although they sounded quite frightening and she was quite scared, she thought about it. However, thinking about it now, she came to the conclusion that the Duke's prohibition was not meant to punish her, but simply that he was worried about her. Looking at the servants, the girl tried to figure out what a worried look should actually look like, because the Duke had looked as if he wanted to kill her. Suddenly, the girl remembered the envelope the Duke had given her and asked the maid about it. Looking at the envelope, the girl was a little surprised that something had come for her. There was no sender or recipient on the envelope. The letter only said that the Duke was her father. The girl was very surprised and thought that this was obvious, because Ayn had adopted her, so she did not understand what it all meant. The girl thought long and hard about why this letter had been sent, because she already knew that she was living in this mansion as an adopted daughter. Finally, she realized that it had been sent so that she would stop calling the Duke by his title. The girl gave the letter to the maid and told her to put it on the shelf for now, because she wanted to reply but didn't know what to write. The girl became agitated and began tossing and turning in bed because she realized that it still felt strange to call the Duke her father. While the girl was unable to find a comfortable position, she fell asleep without noticing. Delphiro noticed this and thought it was cute. After that, the doctor went to report everything to the Duke. An was glad to hear that the girl was feeling better, but he wanted to know if she had said anything else about the letter. The doctor did not know what to say because he could not imagine what the Duke had written in the letter. The girl fell asleep again, but she felt that it was necessary for her young body to recover. Nevertheless, upon hearing the news of Cassian's return, the girl began her day as usual. However, there was an extremely thick fog outside. The maid explained that the fog had completely covered the estate because of the sea, but it hated the blood of the eiders, so it couldn't get inside. The girl realized that the Duke's family had been very opposed to magic from the very beginning, which made them ideal for protecting this territory. Suddenly, Nazia realized that other houses could not boast the same, so she asked what was happening to them. Azelta said that they were all covered in fog. The girl immediately began to worry about Frey, who, judging by everything, could easily be penetrated by the magical fog, but Losha reassured her and said that her brother was fine and feeling much better. The knight was sure that it was all thanks to the lady's visit to the boy. The girl assured him that she had done nothing of the sort. The lady was delighted that the mist had not yet affected the boy, but she understood that if nothing was done, her efforts could be in vain. Suddenly, the maid picked up the girl. She wanted the knight to tell the girl what was hiding behind the fog, because she knew that he could see through it, but the boy said that he couldn't see anything else. The girl understood that even if the knight had a magical eye, it didn't mean that he could see absolutely everything. The maid said that this was why the sea was dangerous, because anything could jump out of it. The girl immediately exclaimed that this was wonderful, and that she would like to see it. The maid was impressed by the little lady's words and repeated that the sea fog was dangerous. Nadia replied that everything would be fine as soon as she became stronger. In his study, the Duke looked out the window. He knew that the Baron's family tried to avoid people as much as possible, but in this place, as soon as the girl began to feel better, she went for walks more and more often. The Duke was pleased that the girl was opening up to him more and more, but he wondered if she was looking for her place, as he had once done in his childhood. Eder noticed that the girl was walking in slippers. Although he was concerned about the thick fog, he understood that winter was coming soon, and she would not be able to run around in slippers. The Duke said that it would be a good idea to get some shoes for the girl to wear when she went out. Delfiro replied that the lady already had several pairs of shoes. The Duke did not understand why the girl was walking around in slippers. The doctor was also curious, because the other shoes were also very comfortable and soft, but for some reason, the little lady chose slippers. The answer was simple, a habit from her past life. The doctor suggested making shoes from the same material as the slippers. The Duke thought about it and gave the task of first investigating the child's level of satisfaction and whether she wanted anything else. Ain asked who had made the slippers, and Delfiro replied that they were the work of the Kemper workshop. They made very cute animal characters and were popular in the capital. The Duke was not interested in where these craftsmen came from. He ordered them to be brought to the estate and promised to provide the tailor with free fabric for life. The doctor was very impressed by what he heard because he knew the history of this fabric. One day, the Duke's financial assistant, Rihar, came to him and said that he had a wonderful business plan that would allow them to achieve impressive results in the second half of the year. In these lands there was a flower called liatos, which bloomed quickly and fell only in the thickest fog. The threads of this flower's stem could be used to make a luxurious fabric. It was light and soft, exclusive to the Iterians, and everyone wanted it. The demand for this fabric was very high. The financial assistant wanted to say that working with this fabric on a regular basis would be very profitable. But for the Duke, it meant that strangers would be trespassing on Iterian territory. The Duke was very angry because it meant that people could instantly fall into the hands of monsters. The assistant had nothing to say in response, and the Duke dismissed him, saying that with such plans he had better not come more than once a month. Since then, he had been living in an outbuilding. Walking down the corridor, the assistant came across two servants arguing about something. The young man approached them and asked what was going on. One of them pointed to his colleague and said that the latest report should have been his, but his colleague insisted on a secret meeting with the lady and received a gift. In that case, the gift should have been his. The colleagues began to argue again, and the assistant tried to stop them and suggested a game to settle the matter. They agreed. The three played rock, paper, scissors, and Rekar won. He held out his hand and asked for the little lady's gift. Walking away with the candy in his hands, the assistant was very disappointed because, although he had received the lady's gift, if he had not been sent to the annex, he could have received the gift himself. On the way, he met two more employees, and they hugged each other because they all wanted to meet the little lady in person. Suddenly, the doctor called the assistant. Delfiro approached him holding a diary in his hands and said that he was looking for him because he wanted to discuss the summer fabric with him. Upon hearing this, Rekar immediately tried to run away because he did not want to be demoted even further in his profession, but the doctor tried to calm the employee down, assuring him that nothing bad would happen. However, the employee did not listen to persuasion, and the doctor had to break into the room where he had locked himself in. Two other employees heard strange noises but could not understand what was happening. As expected of a duke, his residence was very spacious, and even if the girl explored it for several days, she would still not be able to see everything. She also knew that there were places that could not be visited at all because of the danger of fog. That's how Nadia found out that there was one sanctuary that was closed 365 days a year. This intrigued her. The girl guessed that such places usually held family valuables or forbidden books, so she decided to sneak in there at any cost. The maid noticed the girl's sly look and asked if she wanted to visit there. The lady was surprised and asked again if it was possible, and the maid confirmed it. Azelta relayed the Duke's words that since the girl had become a member of the Eder family, there was no place on the estate where she was not allowed to go. The little lady was genuinely surprised. The girl then decided to ask what was in the sanctuary and how big it was. Losha answered that it contained items left behind by previous dukes, as well as other items found in the sea. The girl asked if the knight had ever been to the sanctuary. And when he replied that he had been there once with the head, the little lady also agreed that she wanted to go there, but after getting ready. The maid asked about the preparations, but the girl did not answer, because she was thinking about the treasures that were in the sanctuary. This was especially true of the items from the fog. Finally, the girl said that she wanted to prepare for a picnic in the sanctuary. This greatly surprised both the knight and the maid. The little lady also asked if they had a box to put all the necessary things in, and began to gesture to show which box she wanted. The maid handed her something similar, but a little smaller. Nevertheless, the girl was satisfied and immediately said that they had to go outside. Once in the garden, the lady began to dig the ground eagerly. The knights wanted to do it themselves, but the girl would not let them. The girl said that the knights did not know what kind of soil she needed. The men immediately assured her that they understood soil and wanted to show her, but the lady understood that they knew nothing about magic. In a moment, each of the knights handed her a shovel with a piece of soil, and the girl was surprised that they had all found the soil that was filled with magic. The girl pointed to the one that glowed the most. After that, she agreed to collect the other ingredients she needed, and in a short time, the box was full. Azelta said that she wanted to take it to an environmental laboratory first to make sure everything was okay. The girl did not object, because she was sure that they would not recognize the magic there anyway. Suddenly, the lady asked why the knights were playing with her. The maid explained that they would accompany Natsia to the sanctuary, and the girl was surprised that they were allowed to go there. The maid explained again that since they were helping a member of the Eider family, they were allowed to enter the sanctuary, and if the girl didn't believe her, she could ask the Duke. She thought about it. Nevertheless, she decided to ask the Duke to be sure. When she arrived at Ither's office, the Duke greeted her with some irritation. The girl saw his frightening face and thought that the Duke was angry, but she couldn't understand why. The lady cautiously said that she wanted to have a picnic in the sanctuary and asked if the Duke would join them. The Duke abruptly stopped writing, and the girl realized she had made a mistake because that was not what she wanted to ask. However, the Duke agreed to go, and the girl was surprised at first. Ian repeated that he was ready to help prepare everything for the picnic. The girl was even frightened by his words at first, because it looked as if the Duke was preparing for war. Ether slowly came out from behind the table and, approaching his daughter, asked her what she thought about the party. The Duke said that the girl had become a member of his family, so they could throw a party to announce it, and if she wanted, they could make it her new birthday. Hearing this, the girl almost cried. Her Baron's family didn't even know when she was born, let alone think about celebrating her birthday. But the Duke wanted to designate her birthday and celebrate it. Natsia smiled sincerely and agreed. The girl cautiously decided to ask if Cassian would also be present at the party. The Duke assured her that his brother would not be able to come for some time, and upon hearing this, the lady breathed a sigh of relief. While the Duke was telling her everything, the girl thought that Eder wasn't evil at all. He just took her words seriously. The Duke asked his daughter if she wanted anything else for her party, and the girl immediately replied that she wanted Frey to come. Ain was stunned when he heard this, because a few minutes ago he had emphasized to his daughter that no strangers were allowed to come at this time, and the maid had repeated this aloud.